Hello, welcome. My name is Edith Frank. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Morristown. Welcome to the Candidates Forum for the 7th Congressional District of New Jersey. I will facilitate this forum according to the nonpartisan procedures of the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization which neither supports nor opposes a political party or candidate. And we encourage the informed and active participation in government and work to influence public policy through education and advocacy. So having a forum like this is a really great step toward educating voters. A person elected to the U.S. House of Representatives serves a 2-year term, elected in odd-numbered years. A member of Congress must be at least 25 years of age, a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years, and a resident in the state from which he is elected. The House of Representatives writes federal law, initiates tax bills, has the power to investigate matters of public concern, and monitor federal agencies and programs, declares wars, regulates interstate commerce and foreign commerce, sets federal taxes, coins money, brings charges of impeachment. So that's your civics lesson. The goal of this forum is an opportunity for candidates to address the voters and in the public to provide information for Election Day on November 2nd. Our timekeeper will be Marlene Sincaglia of the League of Women Voters of Berkeley Heights, New Providence, and Summit. She will raise a yellow card as a warning when there is a half minute remaining, and a red card when it is time to stop. You can finish your sentence. Do me a favor, don't start another one. And during the rebuttal, she'll let you know when you have 15 seconds left. Each candidate will have an opening statement. Then I will read the 10 questions presented by the League of Women Voters of New Jersey, and each candidate will then have 2 minutes to respond. In the time remaining after the 10 questions, we will have questions from the audience. We will end with a closing statement of 2 minutes from each candidate. The order of speaking has been determined by a drawing of numbers before the meeting, and I will do my best during the questions to vary it. If I step out of line, you let me know. I would ask that you all hold your applause, please, in the interest of time, and we will have plenty of time to applause at the end. Turn off your cell phones if you haven't already done so. There will be no public, no personal statements, no attacks. The questions will be addressed only to the issues, and I have the right to cut off a question if I think it's inappropriate. And we plan this to last for about an hour and a half. The opening statement. Each candidate has 3 minutes. Our 2 candidates have had a random drawing, and Mr. Potosnak will start the first question. You have 3 minutes. There will be no rebuttal.
Great, thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having us here today. I want to especially say that I'm pleased to have you with us, my mother and my partner today, and Congressman Lance. I want to thank you for finding time in your schedule to be here today for the debate, an important part of our democracy. Running for Congress because America is losing its edge, and I have the real-world experience to make sure we get it back. There was a time in America where we could do anything. We put a man on the moon, and we're struggling today to solve our energy crisis. We put people to work building things like TVs, cars, radios, and today we're shipping more and more jobs overseas. We used to rank top of the world, our students, in math and science, and now we're in the bottom third. That's what I mean when I'm saying America's losing our edge. I'm a science teacher. I'm also a small business owner, and I'm working for your future, not a political career. There are far too many career politicians in Washington like my opponent who are more concerned with winning their next re-election, more concerned in making sure they do the right thing for our families and our businesses. They've allowed the special interests that fund their campaigns, which hundreds of thousands of dollars that they funnel in, to control the agenda. And they put their interests ahead of the needs of our families and businesses. I was born and raised here in New Jersey. I put myself through 2 degrees at Rutgers. I grew up working alongside my parents in a small business, building batteries for police, firefighters, and first responders. I know how to create jobs. I understand the struggles of small business, and I know that small businesses, they're the engine of our economy. My opponent has stood in the way a number of times of pieces of legislation to help our small businesses. In fact, since going to Washington, he hasn't done anything to create a job. The number one concern that we have is job creation. And in the entire 2 years that he's been in Washington, he spent less than a minute, 59 seconds, talking on the House floor about jobs. I'm going to go to Washington to get a job done, to help make sure people get back to work, that our students have access to a high-quality education, that when they graduate, they can get a good job, that there's a good job waiting for them. I'll make sure that we invest in research and development so that we can get our edge back in America and be a leader in the global economy. I'm going to Washington to get a job done. I'm not running for Congress for a job. The only job my opponent cares about is his own.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lance, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with you this morning, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this candidates forum. The League occupies a position of excellence in the history of the United States and is to be commended for all of your fine work. And Mrs. Frank, I thank you for being the moderator. I have participated in other League forums where you have moderated, and I deeply appreciate your being here. Ladies and gentlemen, the number one issue confronting the American people is the state of our economy. And the state of the economy is not strong. We were promised by the Obama administration that if we passed a huge stimulus bill, that unemployment would not increase beyond 8%. Unfortunately, unemployment increased to beyond 10% and now stands in the United States at 9.6%. And tragically in New Jersey at 9.7%. Wherever I go in this congressional district of 54 municipalities stretching from Raritan Bay in the east to the Delaware River in the west, 3 large municipalities in Middlesex County, 16 suburban towns here in Union County, 17 in Somerset, and 18 out in Hunterdon. The question is, where are the jobs? And I am committed to working in a bipartisan way to make sure that more jobs are created. And that will require greater certainty in the business community. 7 in 10 of new jobs to be created will be created by small business in America. And small business is hesitant because of the uncertainty that exists. And beyond that, once we get out of this terrible recession, and certainly we are still in the recession in the minds of the American people because of the extent of joblessness in this country, once we get beyond that, the critical issue currently confronting the American nation, we must address the fundamental issue of this century, the new century, the 21st century, which is the issue of federal debt and annual deficits. Our current debt is $13 trillion and rising rapidly. The annual deficit last year was $1.4 trillion. The annual deficit in the year that just ended on September 30th, $1.3 trillion. These are the largest deficits as a percentage of gross domestic product since 1945, and they are unsustainable. I have a record of service in the state legislature on issues of debt and deficits. In this state, we have the Lance Amendment to the state constitution that prohibits further state borrowing without voter approval, and I intend to continue to work in Washington on this, the critical issue confronting us once we get out of this terrible recession, once jobs are created, and we can move the nation forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I shall now read the 10 questions that were prepared by the League of Women Voters of New Jersey. They were sent to all of the candidates running for the U.S. House of Representatives. I will vary the order speaking. If I get it out of order, you'll let me know. Each candidate has 2 minutes to respond to the question, and after the other candidate has spoken, if you need 45 seconds, Marlene will let you know. You can have 45 seconds, and she will, when you're speaking, you'll have the same 30 seconds to let you know at the end of your 2 minutes. But if you do use time for rebuttal, she'll let you know when you have 15 seconds left. So, Mr. Lance, I guess we will start with you. The first question: what should the federal government's role be in funding and regulating the K-12 public schools? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Primary responsibility for K-12 education is reposed locally in school districts across New Jersey and across America. Of course, to some extent at the state level, state aid to education. I've been involved in that as a member of the state legislature. The federal responsibility is not as great. Roughly 9 in every $10 regarding education K through 12 is from local and state sources. I do believe, however, there is a role for the federal government. Particularly next year, we will have to reauthorize the No Child Left Behind Act. Based upon a 2007 study by the Aspen Commission, chaired by Tommy Thompson, a Republican, and Roy Barnes, a Democrat, there is the belief, and I share this, that we need high standards for every student. And as we renew the No Child Left Behind, I think that we have to insist upon high standards. That was a bipartisan effort of President Bush, of Senator Kennedy, and in the House of Representatives of Mr. Boehner, who I hope will become the Speaker of the House. He was the chairman of the Education Committee. And so I think that we have to make sure that No Child Left Behind is parent-centered, because it's the parents across America who know best as to how to educate their children. We have to work with school boards, and we have to let teachers teach. And in my discussions with teachers across New Jersey, they are concerned that the current No Child Left Behind does not really permit them to teach. Rather, they have to teach to a test. And so I think that has to be reformed. I also favor charter schools, which are, of course, public schools, and I think we should encourage that. And let me finally say I was very disappointed that Michelle Rhee is no longer going to be in charge of education in the District of Columbia. I think she did a terrific job, and I think we have to move forward with reformers like that.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. Mr. Potosnak.
Great. I want to start out by saying my background in education as a science teacher, I spent about 8 years at Bridgewater Raritan Regional High School teaching chemistry, organic chemistry, and also biochemistry, in addition to being a part-time lecturer at Rutgers, where I helped to prepare our next generation of teachers, pre and in service, to engage students, to make sure that they had the skills that they need to be successful, critical thinking and problem solving, so we can get our edge back here in America. In the 7th Congressional District, we have 5 of the top 25 high schools in New Jersey. My opponent, since going to Washington, has latched on to an agenda that cuts critical funding from our future. Our students in our classroom are our future leaders, they're our future entrepreneurs, and our future innovators. And we have to make sure we prepare them and support them in their educational quest to help our country be the most prosperous nation. He voted against a piece of legislation called the Education Jobs Bill. It's $287 million that came to New Jersey in spite of his opposition to put 4,000 teachers back into the classroom where they belong. And when he was questioned by a constituent who asked him, why is it that you voted against this critical piece of legislation? He said that, in fact, it would have a negligible impact. And again, jobs are the #1 concern. Putting people back to work, especially the folks that are in our classroom, making sure they're prepared with the skills that they need, that's not negligible. That impact is not negligible. And this is the kind of leadership that the congressman has had since being in Washington. I want to ensure that our students have the resources they need to be successful. That's how we get our edge back here in America. Not by undercutting and underfunding what we have come to cherish, when rightfully so, we are very lucky to have. Referring to Michelle Rhee, she's chancellor in Washington, D.C. He's a member of Congress representing New Jersey's 7th Congressional District. The focus here is on making sure we can support our children in our schools. And that's what I intend to do as a member of Congress.
You both have an opportunity for 45 seconds for a rebuttal. Mr. Lance, you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you very much. The bill in question was opposed by the editorial board of the Washington Post, which is certainly not a conservative newspaper. The Washington Post said in opposition to the bill that the crusade for an education jobs bill led by the Obama administration and Democratic leaders in Congress has always struck us as more of an election year favor for teachers' unions than an optimal use of public resources. And regarding the use of public resources, this bill is not paid for. There's a 10-year time frame, and yet it's only temporary of 2 years. This is a typical ploy of the Democratic majority in Congress, and incidentally, it would take a good deal of money out of food stamps over the course of next 10 years. The Washington Post indicates that it would reduce food stamps for a family of 3 by $50 a month. I oppose that.
Thank you.
You're-
We have 45 seconds, sir?
Yeah, you're going to hear probably a lot of this in the debate. Excuses. You're wrong. In fact, the bill was paid for. It was paid for over 10 years. That's true. And 4 years from now, it is going to cut food stamps, an increase that was included in a piece of legislation that my opponent opposed. I think the thing that we have to look at in this election is whether we want real-world people who have real-world experience, who are going to put our priorities ahead of the political interests that lead their party. Opposition to making sure our students are supported, that shouldn't have a political party. It's not a Republican idea, it's not a Democratic idea, it's not an independent idea. That's our future, and we have to make sure we support it. And if my... Thank you.
The second question. Do you agree or disagree with the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission? Should Congress pass new legislation as a response to the court's decision? Please explain your answer. Mr. Potosnak.
I disagree with the court's decision. The decision was to allow corporations to give campaign contributions to entities that wouldn't have to be disclosed. And I am in support of complete disclosure. The idea that people can fund unlimited advertisements without anyone knowing who's running it and who's paying for it is a threat to our democracy. And that's why I support the Disclose Act. In addition, this problem with campaign finance is pervasive. My opponent takes 60% of his contributions from special interests, like big banks, Wall Street, and the insurance industry. In fact, he sits on one committee, which is financial services, and has received over $300,000 from two industries that he oversees, and that is the insurance industry and the financial services industry. I support a bill called Fair Elections Now, which is public financing for campaigns. I'm extremely proud that in this last quarter, I doubled the people who funded my campaign than Congressman Lance. But he out-fundraised me because of the special interests that funnel that money into his campaign. And you'll hear that he, in fact, is fighting for their interests over the needs of our families and our businesses. I'm extremely disappointed that the Congress did not pass legislation to require disclosure, to improve transparency, and to keep corporate money out of campaigns. The special interests, they're controlling the agenda in Washington. They have a voice. They have an extremely loud voice. The problem is, many of us don't. We don't have representatives. There are far more lobbyists for every member of Congress, almost 20, shouting every day while we're working every day, going to provide for our families and make sure that our children have a better future than us. And I just ask you, Congressman, why is it that you take so much money from these special interests?
Thank you. Time's up. Mr. Lance.
Thank you very much. I am in agreement with the decision in Citizens United. It was a 5-4 decision in the Supreme Court. There are 4 conservatives on the Supreme Court, 4 liberals on the Supreme Court, and the swing justice, somewhere in the middle, is Justice Anthony Kennedy, who I believe got it right. He wrote the decision for the court. The question was whether or not companies and unions could make independent expenditures regarding campaigns. And Justice Kennedy said, and I quote, "Speech would be suppressed in the realm where its necessity is most evident, in the public dialogue preceding a real election. Governments are often hostile to speech, but under our law and our tradition, it seems stranger than fiction for our government to make this political speech a crime. Yet this is the statute's purpose and design." I come down on the side of the First Amendment, of free speech. And of course, the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, are enshrined in our Constitution. The Constitution was written in 1787, and the Bill of Rights proposed in 1791. And I think we should be particularly proud in New Jersey, because New Jersey was the first state to ratify the Bill of Rights. And so I believe that the Supreme Court was correct in that decision, giving companies and unions the right to free speech. Regarding the Disclose Act, I opposed it. It was opposed by the ACLU, which said the Disclosed Act would restrict free speech in an arbitrary manner favoring one type of organization over another. I agree with the ACLU.
Thank you. Do you need 45 seconds, sir?
Yes, I'd like to share a little bit. Early in the campaign, 2 years ago, the financial collapse that led our economy into the gutter began with a collapse of the banks. One particular set off a trend with Lehman Brothers. My opponent accepted $5,000 from one particular bank, and that's Goldman Sachs. And that was a bank that the SEC sought charges against for its role in this financial calamity. I called on him to return that money, and instead, he just kept it, along with the $600,000+ that he's received from these corporations and special interests. And you can see why he's defending them, because that's who's supporting his campaign. We need transparency to ensure that folks have an opportunity to know who's behind these advertisements.
Mr. Lance, would you like 45 seconds?
Yes, thank you. My opponent receives contributions from labor unions. That's perfectly acceptable. I have a wide variety of contributors. I have always voted my conscience and will continue to do so. The President of the United States received more than $1 million in contributions from Goldman Sachs, and my opponent does not. Ask him to return those contributions. I assure the public that I will always vote my conscience, as I have always done, and I believe that we need to move forward in an aggressive manner to make sure that we create the new jobs in America, so essential to get this economy moving again.
Thank you. The next question. What economic policy should the federal government pursue during this recession? And Mr. Lance, we start with you.
Yes, thank you. The promise was made by the Obama administration that unemployment would not increase beyond 8%. Stated repeatedly last year at the time of the package that was passed, known as the stimulus bill. About $800 billion, and with interest more than $1 trillion. I voted against it. I did not think that it was well targeted, and I think history will judge that to be an accurate decision, since unemployment has increased from below 8% to higher than 10%, and now stands at 9.6%, and as I have said, 9.7% in New Jersey. So what would I do? We need greater business certainty. And if there is one word I would use regarding this question, it is certainty. And so, number one, I would make sure that the tax cuts that were enacted in 2001 and 2003 could continue. Congress should have addressed that issue in September. Congress did not address that issue. We will have to address it in lame duck. I favor continuation of the tax cuts. Number two, certainly regarding the health care bill, it needs major modifications. The 1099 form, where all businesses in America have to report on that form if they do $600 worth of work with another company. That's appalling lack of certainty. And then, of course, lending by the banks. We need greater lending by banks. Banks are reluctant to lend now because of various rules in Washington, and I think that we need to change the mark-to-market system so that banks will lend to a greater extent than is now the case. And finally, we need a regulatory structure that protects both safety and soundness and consumer protection, and a regulatory structure that is more certain for the businesses that will create the 7 in 10 jobs in America, small business, as we move out of this recession. And so my policies will create business certainty, and that is what we need here in America.
Thank you very much.
As I said earlier, small businesses are the engine of our economy. And my plan and what I support is helping them to be as successful as possible so that they can take their dreams of ownership or expansion or improvement and make them a reality in these difficult times. And that means access to capital, making sure that the banks are lending money, that people who look at a store or an empty warehouse and think, what can I put here, can actually go out and get the money they need to get that going and put people to work. I launched my campaign from a small business in my town of North Plainfield, where I live. And here was a guy who wanted to put people to work expanding his organic grocery store with a kitchen. And he was held up in getting a loan from the Small Business Authority because of the lack of action by Congress. My opponent voted 3 times on different occasions for small business bills that would help small businesses to get people back to work. And it got held up for about 2 months. Folks went unemployed because he couldn't get the capital to continue that construction. And that was months ago. He's still finishing up the work. So we need to make sure they have access to that capital. I also support making sure that businesses can make purchases of equipment now and write it off immediately, rather than over a long time. Times are tough, cash on hand is low, so we have to give that tax break over a shortened amount of time so they can upgrade their equipment, become more efficient, expand into other areas. And then the key thing to help our economy is investing in research and development, because we have the most innovative companies here in the 7th Congressional District. We invented the solar cell in the 7th Congressional District, and we're not making solar panels here in America. China 2 years ago made 5%, and now they're well over 50%. To keep jobs here, we need to reward companies for creating and inventing, for creating jobs here, and for saving jobs. And that's what I support. We heard a lot about some other proposals, but no action since he's been in Congress.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lance.
Thank you. I am the sponsor, along with others, of what is known as the Small Business Assistance and Relief Act. The measure would extend tax relief, increase startup deductions, reduce regulatory burdens, and improve lending for New Jersey's small businesses. And let me say that regarding extension of the current tax structure, under no circumstances should we be raising taxes on anybody in America, because 7 in the 10 jobs that will be created by small business. And some say we should only do this for some. I think we should make sure it's true for all. The tax cuts should be extended for all in this country.
Thank you very much. Do you need 45 seconds, sir?
Yeah, it'll be very quick. I first wanted to correct you, Congressman Lance. You're not a sponsor on the small business bill. You're actually a co-sponsor. A piece of legislation was written by one of your colleagues, Mike Castle. This is the problem in Washington, where we have individuals who like to grandstand on pieces of legislation that they've co-sponsored, instead of actually getting involved in doing things, supporting pieces of legislation that are actually improving people's lives, giving tax credits to company, creating jobs in the local economy. Again, 3 different occasions where he's voted against small business. And he mentioned tax cuts. I find it interesting too. He voted against the largest tax cut for the middle class in the history of the United States. I support lower taxes for the middle class.
Excuse me. Time's up. Thank you. The next question, number 4. What should the U.S. short-term and long-term goals be in Iraq and Afghanistan, and how should these be achieved? And I believe it's your turn, sir. You have 2 minutes.
We need to make sure we bring our troops home quickly. We have really have so many lives that have gone in these wars. I respect our military, our brave young men and women who are serving, the sacrifices of their family and their sacrifice. And that's why I support bringing our troops home. The goals in Afghanistan and Iraq are unclear. We are not making progress, and we have huge needs, as we're talking about here at home, to ensure that we get our economy moving and create jobs and support our future so we can get our edge back. I'm extremely concerned about nuclear Iran. It's a great threat to our nation, to our key ally in Israel, and to our world. And I am strongly in favor of making sure we do not allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. I also want to talk a little bit about our military and military strength. A bill that was up this year that's seen a lot of debate, and that is the Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal, a piece of legislation that my opponent opposed. I believe that we need to have the strongest military, the best and the brightest serving in our armed forces. Admiral Mike Mullen supports the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Military and also civilians on this issue have had a resounding praise of making sure every young man and woman who wants to serve our nation and fight for our freedom has the opportunity to do that with honesty and integrity. And I'm extremely disappointed that the president is appealing the decision where it was found unconstitutional. And I think on this vote in particular, my opponent not only is on the wrong side of history, but is on the wrong side of the Constitution. We need to allow our troops to fight for us and our freedom openly and honestly.
Thank you. Mr. Lance.
Thank you. I believe the President is doing a good job regarding Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is an area of bipartisan cooperation, and the President and the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and the Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, asked the Congress to support our troops and to support what we are doing in Iraq and Afghanistan. The President has reduced our commitment in Iraq to about 50,000, and the role there is not, at the moment, a combat role. We, of course, pray for our troops in Iraq because they are still in a very dangerous situation. But I believe the President has done a good job in drawing down the number of troops we have in Iraq, and our mission has changed there. Regarding Afghanistan, the President delivered a major policy address on this at West Point about 8 or 9 months ago. I thought it was an extremely well-reasoned statement of national policy. And the President stated at that time at West Point that we were in Afghanistan for the exclusive purpose of the national security interest of the United States. I agree with our mission in Afghanistan so long as it is exclusively for the purpose of our national security interest. I do not favor nation building, and I do not want to stay in Afghanistan forever. The President and the Congress will be reviewing this again next summer. I hope there is significant progress so that we can leave Afghanistan at an early date. I, of course, have been involved in classified briefings on this issue, and there are al-Qaeda and Taliban in Afghanistan and in neighboring Pakistan, and we are using, at the suggestion of the President, and the President has increased this from the prior administration, drone missiles regarding Pakistan. Other issues of importance obviously include the fact that I am a strong supporter of the democratic state of Israel. Israel has a right to exist in peace and freedom, to exist not only as a state, but to exist as a Jewish state. And I'm greatly concerned about the potential that Iran may be building a nuclear weapon, and I favor strong sanctions.
Thank you, sir. Do you need 45 seconds?
Yes, you know, when we talk about fiscal responsibility, I think it's important also to note that every troop that we have in combat costs $1 million a year. And when you do the math, we have a lot of our national treasure going overseas in these wars that have unclear objectives. Of course, I support rooting out terrorism, making sure that those folks who want to do us harm are unable, and we can make sure that and prevent terrorist attacks and any threats to our national security. But I think we have to be careful and make sure we're spending our resources wisely so that our future is in our best interest, wholeheartedly supported, and that is through investments here at home.
Thank you. Do you need 45 seconds?
Thank you. Let me repeat that I support the policy of the President of the United States. This is an area where there is bipartisan cooperation. Sometimes those in the media only point out where there is not. This is an area where there is clearly bipartisan cooperation. Regarding don't ask, don't tell, which Mr. Potosnak raises, I believe we should have waited until a completion of the study by the military. That study will be completed on the 1st of December while this Congress is still in session, and I look forward to reading that study. And I have chosen, instead of having a position on this now, to wait until see what the study determines, a study of the military, and I certainly favor that military study. And let me repeat, in a bipartisan capacity, I think our mission in Afghanistan should be limited, and I support the President.
Thank you very much. The fifth question, do you support or oppose the healthcare financing reforms enacted in 2010? What aspects, if any, would you change? And Mr. Lance, we start with you.
Thank you very much. I very definitely voted no on the Health Care Act. The promise was made, and this was a fundamental promise, that it would reduce the cost of health care in this society over time. The phrase that was used is that it would bend the health care curve. Bend the health care curve. Nonpartisan experts who advised the Congress have now concluded. In 2009, healthcare spending in this country, this is both public and privately, together account for 17.3% of the economy. 17.3% of gross domestic product in 2009. In 2019, that will increase to 19.6% of gross domestic product. This does not bend the healthcare curve. It makes it even worse. And this is fundamentally why I voted against the healthcare bill. And I think it is unfortunate that we could not bend the healthcare curve. What would I do? I'm a member of what is known as the Tuesday Lunch Group, Republicans in the House from the East, the Middle West, and California. I am one of the sponsors. Mr. Potosnak uses the phrase co-sponsor, so be it. I am one of the sponsors, along with my friend Congressman Castle from Delaware and others, Congressman Kirk, the Republican candidate for United States Senate in Illinois, and others that had a proposal. We had a proposal. Certainly, it says you cannot be discriminated against for pre-existing conditions or have lifetime caps. That's in the current bill. Those are good provisions in the current bill. Our bill included them. Young people could stay on their parents' policies. However, we said purchase across state lines by pooling together, and most fundamentally, medical malpractice insurance reform. Not one whit of medical malpractice insurance reform is contained in the health care bill that was signed into law. It is critical that we have that moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Potosnak.
I think the health care reform is so critical for our nation. I actually went without health care. My mom, who I referenced earlier, is here with me today. She had to take a job at night at UPS, loading boxes onto a truck so that I could have health care, because her primary job that she was doing during the day didn't offer health care. The employment-based system is hurting lots of Americans. Folks don't have access to health care, and certainly, as the congressman alluded to, health care costs are far outpacing wages that are for their increases and far outpacing inflation. And that's why it's so critical that health care reform was passed. Is it perfect? No. There are many things that need to be repaired, and that's what I support. Let's talk about what repeal would mean, what my opponent supports. It means opening the donut hole back up for our seniors. So they would have to choose between food, groceries, and getting a medication to continue to improve the quality of their life. It would mean that folks could go bankrupt for being ill, or if you have a pre-existing condition, that you could be kicked off of a policy or denied insurance. And that's not the America that I believe in. In order for us to get our edge back here in America, we need to make sure that each American has access to a high-quality education. Things that I support changing in the bill to help keep costs down, improving competition, making sure that we have more options besides the insurance companies that fund the congressman's campaign. We have other options for folks to go to and turn to get access to health care. In addition, I support competition across state lines that are adjacent. I don't think it's appropriate to go to a state like Arkansas where they don't cover mammograms and say that someone who buys a policy there is getting a good health care policy. We need to focus on prevention to ensure that folks that might be getting sick, we can help prevent them from getting sick. And the costs that are associated with that are so much greater. And these are some of the things that would end with a repeal.
Thank you. Mr. Lance, you need 45 seconds?
Thank you. Regarding mammograms, I took the lead in Congress to make sure that the recommendations of a panel advising the Department of Health and Human Services not move forward. Those recommendations were that mammograms should not necessarily be covered until age 50 in women, and I was vigorously opposed to that, and I worked in a bipartisan capacity to make sure that those recommendations were never part of law or part of administrative rule or regulation. I did not hear medical malpractice insurance reform. Let me repeat, that is at the heart of what we should do moving forward. Let's have true medical malpractice insurance reform.
Thank you very much. Mr. Potosnak, you need 45 seconds?
I'm very concerned with the ideas that he's putting forward as far as repeal. Again, let me state why. Making sure that our students can have access to medical insurance, keeping their on their parents' policy to age 26 is extremely helpful for our families. Helping to ensure that folks don't go bankrupt. That's what we need. We need to protect the insurance that folks have and give them more options and choice. the mammogram bill that the congressman referenced, it didn't pass. It wasn't even offered as an amendment to the health care legislation. And he's had an opportunity since going to Washington to improve things. That's what he was sent there to do. And he hasn't done that. He actually hasn't done anything to improve the legislation.
Thank you. Time's up. Question number 6. Many students are struggling with the rising costs of tuition for higher education. What actions, if any, should the federal government take to address this situation? And Mr. Potosnak, I think it's your turn to start.
This is a very large amount of my constituency it has a concern with that. I was speaking with a gentleman earlier today. I asked him what his number one issue was, and I expected it to be jobs, which my opponent has only spoken on the House floor again for 59 seconds since going to Washington out of 48 million seconds that Congress has been in session. And, you know, for me, someone who put myself through college, taking on extra jobs to pay my own way, having access to a high-quality education and student loans and grants is extremely important. It was a gateway. And my opponent opposed a bill that would have allowed more students to be able to afford to go to college. He actually supported giving banks a subsidy of $80 billion, skimming interest and fees off of students who were paying for loans. Fortunately, that bill passed, and instead of that money going to line the pockets of the bankers that fund his campaign, it's going to help more students afford to go to college because tuition rates are far outpacing inflation. And in order for us to get our edge back in America, we need to make sure we train the next generation of workers to have the skills to solve all of the challenges that we face, to be inventive and add to our prosperity so that America can lead in the global economy. College should not be out of reach for any American. Ensuring that they have access starts with making it a top priority for our nation. And in Congress, I intend to support measures to improve access to college and also to improve the quality of college education, to ensure that universities have the support that they need to continue to provide a high-quality education. Because we know lots of folks come from out of the country because we're doing a great job in our universities, and we need to support them and not give money to bankers who already have enough money from our ATM fees and all the other ways that they rack up their profits.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lance.
Yes, thank you. I intend to address the student aid issue. But first, let me say that, of course, my amendment regarding mammograms was not considered on the floor, Mr. Potosnak. That is because the Democratic majority has not permitted an open rule. For the first time in the history of Congress, there has not been one open rule in the House of Representatives under the leadership of Nancy Pelosi. Every bill has been under a closed rule. None of our amendments could be considered. And so let's retire Nancy Pelosi. And under the leadership of Speaker-to-be John Boehner, if we gain the majority, we will have open rules, which is the way Congress should work. So of course my amendment was not considered. Not one open rule in 2 years in the Congress of the United States. Regarding the student aid issue, obviously we should help young people have the opportunity to attend college. Obviously. The bill I supported was a Republican alternative which would extend bipartisan student loan reforms passed in 2008 while requiring a study to make recommendations for the development of a federal student loan program. And the bill as passed in its final version came back to us in the House of Representatives as part of the health care bill. It wasn't even a standalone bill, the bill that actually passed. It was a portion of the health care bill. And under the reform that has been suggested by Minority Leader Boehner and by Minority Whip Cantor, we will not have bills in Congress that merely have 2 or 3 different matters attached to them. We will have standalone bills, and that student aid bill, as it finally came back to the House of Representatives, was not a standalone bill. It was part of the health care bill, and as I have suggested, I was vigorous in my opposition to the health care bill. We need to reform the health care bill in the ways I have suggested, including medical malpractice insurance reform, and regarding student aid, we have to work in a bipartisan capacity to make college available for all young people who wish to attend college.
Thank you very much. Do you need 45 seconds?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree again with a congressman. He actually voted against the student loan reform bill twice. Once when it was a standalone bill, and then again when it was attached to the health care legislation. I want to reiterate my support for access to college, to make sure that our middle-class families can afford to send their kids to school. To make sure that they have access requires leaders in Washington that have real-world experience that put their needs ahead of the special interests that fund their campaigns. To make sure that our families are supported and that the future of America is supported, because they're our future leaders. They're the ones that are going to meet the challenges that we face, things we can't even think about today. And that's why I stand before you today running for Congress, because I'm concerned that we're losing our edge, and it's folks like my opponent who are not helping us get our edge back with these broken policies.
Thank you. Mr. Lance, you get 45 seconds.
I was guided in my vote based upon considered judgment of Senator Lamar Alexander of Tennessee, one of the Congress's great experts on education funding. When I was a young person attending law school at Vanderbilt, I had campaigned for Lamar Alexander for governor. He later became governor of Tennessee, and before he went to the United States Senate, he was the president of the University of Tennessee. And he indicated, and he took the lead on this, that there ought to be a public-private partnership. I certainly agree that we need to make sure that all young people who want to attend college will be able to attend college, and I am extremely sorry that the final bill was contained in the Health Care Act, and under Republican control of the House of Representatives, two such significant issues will not be in one bill. They will be considered separately.
Thank you very much. The seventh question. Gender inequities and biases persist in our society. Whether in professional opportunities, women are still paid about 77% of what men are paid for the same work, or healthcare coverage, or many other areas. Is it Congress's role to reduce these inequities and biases, and if so, what should be implemented to do so? And Mr. Lance, we start with you.
Yes, very definitely Congress has a role to play in this. So do state legislatures, but certainly Congress has a role. I believe in complete gender equality. How could that not be the case? My own mother was the first person in her family to go to college and to be graduated from college. She was graduated from what was then Montclair State Teachers College, now Montclair State University, and she was graduated in 1935. How could I not? My paternal grandmother, Florence Smith Lance, was graduated from what was then Trenton Normal School in 1902. Certainly the first person in her family to graduate from college. I come from a strong tradition of trying to achieve gender equality. To that end, I was one of 3 Republicans in the House of Representatives to vote for the Lilly Ledbetter bill. This says that women cannot be discriminated against in the workforce and that they can sue when they first realize that they are being discriminated against in their paycheck. I'm very proud of that vote. Some have criticized me for it, but I do think that women should have the same pay for the same work as men, and I think the Lilly Ledbetter bill will make sure that that is the case. I'm also one of 18 Republicans in the House who voted for a piece of legislation on hate crimes, and we already have that legislation in New Jersey. Our legislature has taken the lead on that issue, and certainly I believe that regarding issues like mammograms, I have been one of those taking the lead on that. There is a role for Congress, and let's make sure that we have a society where there is not discrimination against anybody based upon irrelevant considerations like gender. And there are other irrelevant considerations as well, but certainly regarding gender, Congress has a role to play, and I have a committed record in this regard, particularly regarding Lilly Ledbetter.
Thank you. Mr. Potosnak.
Women receive, on average, across the country, 77 cents on the dollar to men's earnings. And certainly there is still a pervasive inequity in pay. One of the pieces of legislation that Congress considered in this last Congress was something called the equal pay, which allowed businesses voluntarily to participate, to keep track and records to see what was in fact happening in the workforce that they employed, if there were discrepancies and inequality in their pay structure. That's a piece of legislation that passed the House that my opponent voted against. He supports the lawsuits once it happens, but not giving the companies the tools to avoid the problem from happening so that they can have the data to make it right. I think equality in our workforce is extremely important. The diversity of ideas that are presented and the solutions are extremely helpful, and provide strength for our nation. And I also support in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, an area where women are severely underrepresented, encouraging more young girls to get involved and to pursue degrees in science and math so they can help to provide solutions that a male-dominated workforce may not be able to come up with. And in fact, in Congress, there've been a number of efforts to help encourage women to study science, technology, engineering, and math. And I think we need to continue to work on that. I spent a brief time, about 2.5 years, working and advising members of Congress on Capitol Hill as an Albert Einstein Fellow. It's a program for math and science teachers to take their real-world experience and advise members of Congress on science and education policy. And I helped to craft a piece of legislation to do just that, to encourage more young women to get involved in science, technology, engineering, and math, and to strengthen our nation's science, technology, engineering, and math workforce.
Thank you very much. Do you need 45 seconds, Mr. Lance?
Thank you. Let me say that I agree with Mr. Potosnak that we should encourage young women to study math and science, and certainly there should be an equal opportunity there. And I commend Mr. Potosnak for his service, his public service in the teaching profession. I would never disparage his public service, even though he disparages my public service. I think he should be commended for his teaching, and teaching of a hard science, chemistry. Math and chemistry and physics and biology are definitely areas that require expertise. I am sure Mr. Potosnak is expert in these subjects, and I'm sure we are in agreement that young women, to the greatest extent possible, should be encouraged to study math and science.
Thank you very much. You need 45 seconds, or you're all set?
I was just going to expand a little bit on the piece of legislation that I helped, and that was to ensure that we could get our edge back by encouraging more students to get involved in science and math, and also to get rid of redundancy and save taxpayers money to make sure we get the most bang for our buck. We have about 12 agencies in the federal government involved in encouraging young people to get involved in science and mathematics. And there's no coordinated set of goals. One of the problems with government sometimes is they are too big to know what one or the other is doing. And so this piece of legislation helps to provide coordination and a centralized focus so that we can encourage more young people to get involved and avoid and reduce duplicative programs so that we can focus on the things that work. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
That's good, because I was going to stop you.
Thank you.
The eighth question. Would you vote to adopt a cap and trade system or a carbon tax? Please explain your answer, and we start with you, Mr. Potosnak.
I oppose the cap and trade piece of legislation that was considered in the House that my opponent supported. While I agree with the tenets, we have a clean and green alternative to our addiction to foreign oil and fossil fuels. I believe that it passed too much of the cost onto consumers and left polluters actually raking in lots of money. I support legislation to reduce our consumption of fossil fuels and to ensure that we have less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And that legislation should include investments in research and development and making polluters pay to provide an incentive for alternatives instead of rewarding them for polluting. We spend $80 billion a year in subsidizing oil and gas exploration, and a mere $2 billion in research and development into alternatives. We need to change that scale and spend more in alternatives and less to help the big profit industries like oil and gas continue to rake in the money. We're not going to get our edge back here in America if we continue to give handouts to oil. We're going to get it by investing in things that are going to help our future. Green economy and green alternatives, things we can't even talk about or think about today because they don't exist. But they will when we make it a priority. We know that we do have alternatives. New Jersey is ranked second in the nation in its production of solar energy. And that is a huge accomplishment. And it's because people have focused and made it a priority. But across this nation, steps are not being taken to ensure that we have new alternatives beyond solar and wind so that we can meet our energy challenges through our best quality in America, and that is our ability to innovate and problem solve.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lance?
Yes, thank you. I definitely oppose a carbon tax. I oppose raising taxes on anybody. I certainly hope that we extend the current tax structure at the end of the year. We should have done that earlier this year. I did vote for the cap and trade bill. This was before the Copenhagen conference, where we made no progress with China and India, and I would not vote for it again. That legislation is dead. Let me say, however, that New Jersey is leading the nation toward moving to cleaner electricity. We get about 50% of our energy from nuclear power. I am a strong proponent of nuclear power. Neighboring states like Pennsylvania and Ohio, they get most of their electricity from coal, and coal tends to be dirty, and we have to move in the direction of cleaner coal, and we certainly have to move, in my judgment, in the direction of nuclear power. PSE&G, which is the largest public utility in this state, serving this area of Scotch Plains, where we are located today, wants to build a new nuclear power plant in southern New Jersey, but so far has been unable to do so. And I hope moving forward that the new Congress will address this issue, moving away from foreign oil, from oil in places like Venezuela, a dangerous dictator there, and that we have more energy from home. That means clean, new nuclear power. It also means natural gas. We have a great supply of natural gas in this country. Less dependence on dangerous foreign oil, more on sources here in this country. New Jersey is leading the charge in solar energy, and I think that is in part due to what the New Jersey legislature in time has done on that issue, and I am proud to have been involved in those issues in Trenton.
Thank you very much.
Do we have rebuttal?
Took the words right out of my mouth. Yes, sir. 45 seconds.
Very nice. This is the typical sort of Washington speak. I was for it before I was against it. And something came up and something was different. He did, in fact, support a piece of legislation that would have increased energy costs for consumers and rewarded polluters. There are many other plans out there that I didn't hear him speak about. Things like cap and dividend, which provides end users with the benefit rather than the polluters. And there are many other models. As far as nuclear power, I'm extremely concerned about the idea of nuclear. In fact, when he was questioned in his primary, Congressman Lance said one of the reasons he voted for the legislation was because the nuclear industry told him it was a good idea. I don't know why we're taking cues from the nuclear industry. I'm concerned with countries like Iran, who are using nuclear power as a cover for nuclear weapons.
Excuse me.
And
your time is up.
thank you.
You have 45 seconds, sir?
Yes, thank you. This is clearly a difference. I favor nuclear power as one of the options moving forward, not the only one. One of them, the French have 80% of their electricity from nuclear power. They have developed a process for reprocessing nuclear waste. It's not the only solution. We also need natural gas and greater reliance on sources here in this country, but nuclear power should be among those moving forward to get away from dangerous foreign oil.
Thank you very much. Question number 9. The nation's infrastructure, including highways, bridges, railroads, tunnels, etc., is aging. How would you approach this problem? And I believe, Mr. Lance, it is your turn to start.
Yes, thank you. This will be determined by the new Congress, the Congress that is elected in 2 weeks. This will be through the reauthorization of the Transportation and Infrastructure Bill. And that is reauthorized every so often, I believe every 5 years, and it will be reauthorized, I hope, next year. I will work in a bipartisan capacity with colleagues on both sides of the aisle for reauthorization of the Transportation Bill. I'm extremely close friends with Frank Lo-Biondo, distinguished member of Congress from southern New Jersey. He has served in Congress since 1994. We served together in the state legislature, and I take guidance from Congressman Lo-Biondo on transportation matters. I think he is doing a terrific job. Let me say that I will fight for our fair share of funding here on the East Coast and here in New Jersey regarding the transportation bill. It's not a committee on which I am likely to serve. I'm currently on the Financial Services Committee. Another committee of interest of mine is the House Energy and Commerce Committee. I don't know whether I can get on that committee or not, but on the Transportation Committee, I want to work with Congressman Lobiondo, Congressman Schuster from Pennsylvania, and Democratic members of that committee as we together reauthorize the transportation bill. Let me say that I know, although I do not know well, Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood. The Secretary of Transportation was a Republican member of the House of Representatives before he was appointed by the President to his cabinet. I think that this is an issue where we should work together in a bipartisan fashion, and I'm pleased that President Obama chose Ray LaHood to be Secretary of Transportation.
I think we should work together in a bipartisan fashion on every issue. And transportation is one that helps our local economy. The train line that runs through, we have 4 here in the 7th Congressional District. The Raritan Valley line, currently you have to switch in Newark when you're riding along to get into the city. And there's a tunnel that's being built, the ARC Tunnel, which is under a lot of debate currently. And I want to be clear, I support the ARC Tunnel and that project, because what it means for folks here is that 40 minutes of their round-trip commute will be cut off, and they'll get 3.5 hours more a week to spend with their families, helping them with homework, attending parent-teacher conferences, and that's a week and a half over the course of a year. That's a project that my opponent, since being in Congress, hasn't done anything to support, and in fact is supporting the governor on this to can it. It's 100 years since we've had an infrastructure project of this magnitude in our state, and we rank 50th in the nation in the amount of dollars we bring back from our federal taxes, called a donor state. And when he talks about bringing that money back, this is how we do it, because it improves our local economy. It reduces traffic on our congested roadways. It makes sure that our time with our family is greater, and then also our quality of life is better in the environment. Mass transit is something that I support. In addition, I've spoken very loudly about my support for opening the West Trenton branch of of New Jersey Transit, which would add station stops in Hillsborough and also in Skillman as part of Montgomery, so that we can continue on this ARC Tunnel once it's built, direct route to New York. It was scrapped in 1984 because there wasn't enough ridership. It exists, the train line's there, and now those communities have grown twofold. And we can help keep folks off of 206 and some of the traffic on 202 by making these improvements. And that's something that, since going to Washington, my opponent has not done anything about.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lance, would you like 45 seconds?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Potosnak mischaracterizes my position. What I have said is that I favor the governor's review of the ARC Tunnel, and I certainly believe that we need to review it for the following reason. It is estimated to cost $8.3 billion, but there is now a suggestion that it would cost a great deal more than that. $3 billion from the federal government, $3 billion from the Port Authority, which is our money, is New Jersey money, because the Port Authority is a bi-state agency controlled by Albany and Trenton, and $2.3 billion from New Jersey taxpayers. All cost runs at the moment would be borne by New Jersey taxpayers, and I certainly favor a review. And if we build the ARC Tunnel, it should not go to Macy's basement on 34th Street. It rather should go to Penn Station and ultimately, I hope, to Grand Central.
Okay, thank you.
I wasn't trying to mischaracterize his work. Actually, there was a letter in Congress that members circulated supporting funding for the ARC Tunnel that Congressman Lance didn't sign on to. This is an important issue for us, making sure that we improve our quality of life in our locality across this district is a primary difference between the two of us. I'm not just going to talk about what I support. I'm going to go to Washington to get a job done and actually do something and make sure that we fund the ARC Tunnel, that we can improve our transportation along this corridor, higher access to better jobs that pay more, 60% more average pay in New York City. And that's something that's really going to help us continue to provide for our children.
I'm going to stop you right there. We do have another question about the ARC Tunnel, and so I will give you both a full 2 minutes each to address that if I can interrupt you. The last question that was sent to you in advance. Do you support a path to legalization for those presently in the country without authorization? If so, what actions on the part of federal or state government do you believe could improve the situation? And if yes, specify the steps that path would include. And in this case, we start with you, Mr.
Potosnak.
I knew I was going to do that. I apologize.
No problem. Thanks so much, Edith. Our immigration system is broken. Both our employment-based system and our family immigration system are failing. They're failing our nation, and they're failing individuals who want to come here. We are a nation of immigrants. Many of us came here through immigration. And it's unfortunate that so many politicians have been unwilling to take on this critical issue. In the last Congress, there was no action on immigration. So some of the things that I support. I think we do need to make sure we secure our borders, to make sure that the drugs and the weapons and the human trafficking, that we can cease these behaviors and strengthen our borders, both to Mexico and in Canada. I also support, for folks that are looking for immigration here in our country for legal status, a path to citizenship. There are many families that are separated one another for 20 years, waiting to bring their loved ones into this country. In addition, I have one constituent that sent me an email because he's separated from his partner because of the broken immigration laws and is living in Canada. These are two individuals that are employed by U.S. companies, but they can't live here because the immigration system is broken. And so they're forced to live in Canada, pay Canadian taxes, and work for an American company. And we need to make sure that they can be here legally and make improvements to our immigration system. Comprehensive immigration reform is so important for us. That's what's going to help us to be a strong nation and to ensure that folks that are in the shadows come out. And we also need to make sure that companies that are employing undocumented workers, that they are also held liable.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lance?
Yes, on this issue, we must secure our borders first. And our southern border is not yet secure. And certainly, I disagreed with the decision of the Obama administration to sue the state of Arizona. The state of Arizona, the governor, and the legislature took the action they did because of lack of progress in Washington, the failure of this Congress. And this of Congress, of course, is controlled by the Democratic Party. We need to secure our borders first. And I would advise the administration to work with Arizona and other states in the Southwest on this issue. I also believe that those who are not here legally should not be able to work with businesses as they do now, receiving employment. I think business has a responsibility not to hire those who are not here legally. And there are some in the business community who have criticized my position on this, but I believe that business has a responsibility in this regard as well. We need to secure our borders first, and we have to make sure that the business community does not hire those who are here illegally. Regarding the overall issue, I hope the new Congress will address it, but we have to do what I have said first before we attack comprehensive immigration reform. And when we do attack comprehensive immigration reform, after securing our borders and after making sure business does not hire those who are not here legally, I certainly favor placing at the top of the line, first in line, those who obey the rules and who are patiently waiting. And I do not think that that is necessarily the direction this Congress would go. But my overall criticism is that this Congress has done nothing, and certainly we need a better relationship with the business community on this issue so that they do not hire those who are here inappropriately, and we need to secure our borders.
Thank you very much. Do you need 45 seconds, sir?
Briefly, I just want to remind the congressman that he's part of this Congress. And part of that responsibility is improving the policies that are affecting Americans, that are affecting our businesses, our ability to hire new employees, our ability to create and create jobs. One of the things about the immigration system that is very difficult to navigate is the rules. because the rules don't favor legal immigration. They exist, but they need improvement. Times have changed since the last time that the legislation was written, and Congress after Congress has failed to address and make these critical improvements so we can help those who want to be here legally. And that's a primary responsibility and something that I take very seriously.
Thank you very much. You need 45 seconds, Mr. Lance?
No, thank you.
We have a few minutes left over for questions from the audience. They will get a 2-minute response from our candidates, and I will offer the question to the candidates in varying, and I will vary the order. Terry Thompson will collect your cards. I have a couple questions now. I don't know. We've got some cards we can pass out. We are only going to have a few minutes because we're going to wrap this up by 1 o'clock, right? Okay. I would ask that the questions be only pertinent to the issues. And the candidates, you can choose to answer it or not answer it. It may be a question that you think you've already answered. You'll have 2 minutes and a 45-second rebuttal. The first question I have, as I promised you, is related to the ARC tunnel. This question comes from a member of the press. Did Governor Christie make the correct decision in stopping the ARC tunnel project and then allowing 2 weeks to look for alternative funding sources to review the cost overruns? Should New Jersey move forward with this project given the cost overrun? Mr. Lance, I'll start with you.
Yes, thank you. I'm a strong supporter of Governor Christie, and he is a supporter of mine. On this issue, I favor a review as to funding. As I've indicated, $3 billion from the federal government at the moment, $3 billion from the Port Authority, and that's really New Jersey money because the Port Authority is a bi-state agency, and then $2.3 billion at the moment from the state of New Jersey, and then whatever cost overruns occur. And I think that we need to get a better handle on the potential cost overruns, and certainly I favor greater contributions from the federal government and contributions from the state of New York. The state of New York has not put up a penny for this proposal, and obviously the tunnel is on one half in New Jersey and the other half in New York. I think that situation might clarify itself once a governor of New York is elected on Tuesday, November 2nd. New York State has been in some flux with a series of governors. There will be an election. I think that the new governor of New York should be able to sit down with the governor of New Jersey, my friend Chris Christie, because I think New York should be involved in the funding of this. By New York, I mean Albany, as well as Port Authority money, more federal money, and certainly I don't think New Jersey should bear the entire burden of cost overruns.
Thank you.
I think in this issue, there's a clear difference between the two of us. It's been 20 years in the making, this project. And every day since the governor's made his decision to consider alternatives, which ended up being cancellation of the project, which ended up then being let's reconsider again, we're spending money. $600 million have been spent alone in this project. And we need to continue. We need to make sure that the ARC tunnel is built so that commuters across the state have access to New York. Again, 100 years since the last upgrade, since any rail transportation project. It's far too long. We need to make sure that our future, that we look out for it today. That's what investing in our future is. We can't continue to look at things like a leaky roof and say, well, we're not going to fix it, and then it destroys the home. Home values along the Raritan Valley line will increase as much as 25% for homes that are within 1 mile of a station. The benefit to our community far outweighs the cost. And while I agree that New Jersey should not bear the full burden, I want to remind you that the project is on budget right now, and there's plenty of time to look to other revenue sources, including in Congress. I will fight to make sure that we bring our tax dollars home in an investment like the ARC Tunnel and others to improve our community. It's critical for our future to create jobs here and to make sure people have access to higher quality and higher paying jobs in New York. I think it's really going to help us out.
Thank you very much. You need 45 seconds, Mr. Lance?
Yes. I think we have to have a better handle on the funding. And having come from the state legislature where I was the leader in trying to have some sort of fiscal responsibility. It took me 10 years to get the Lance Amendment into our state constitution. I do not want to have an open-ended check as to the taxpayers of New Jersey who would pay for cost overruns. Let's have a calm, collected study as to how much this is really going to cost, and let's make sure that New Jersey does not bear the entire burden.
Thank you very much. Did you need 45 seconds?
I did. I want to talk a little bit about fiscal responsibility, because in the last year, my opponent hasn't made one recommendation for a spending cut. Article 1 of the Constitution gives the responsibility of Congress for our spending, and each year they undergo a process. And last year, Congressman Lance couldn't find one thing in the budget to cut. To me, that is a dereliction of duty. When I go to Congress, I'm going to make sure that we get our priorities right and make spending decisions that put our future ahead of the political and special interests. And that's what this tunnel is about.
Thank you very much. I have a question on a very different topic. Do you support or oppose the this assault weapons ban? Should assault weapons be allowed in our cities? And I think I will start with you, Mr. Potosnak.
Thank you. The assault weapons ban certainly speaks to security and safety in our urban environments. I grew up with guns in my house. My father taught me to respect a weapon, and it was something that I enjoyed. I think, the freedom to have a gun should be one that's respected, but I also think that we need common sense policies to protect children from having access to a gun and by accidentally hurting themselves or someone else, and in our urban environments and throughout this nation to have common sense policies that ensure that folks that are going to do harm to one another are limited as far as their access, and we have a check and a balance to gun ownership, and those make sense to me. And I think it's important that we continue to maintain the right of gun owners to have a gun in their possession.
Mr. Lane.
Yes, the semi-automatic weapon ban should be decided state by state. I think this is classically a state issue and not an issue for the federal government, and what might be appropriate for New York or New Jersey is probably not appropriate for Wyoming or Idaho. And so I do not believe this is really at its heart a congressional matter. There is something, however, that is congressional in nature, and that is whether there should be the fundamental right to own a weapon if you are of age and if you do not have a criminal background. And that case went to the Supreme Court of the United States. It involves Illinois, and there's also a related matter involving the District of Columbia, which does involve Congress. And I'm firmly of the belief that if you are law-abiding, if you have no criminal background, if you are of age, you should be able to have a weapon. And I'm pleased that the Supreme Court of the United States has reached that fundamental decision. This was what was really meant by the First Amendment. Is it merely for a militia, or is it based upon a personal right? And I believe fundamentally that this is a personal right.
Do you need 45 seconds?
No.
Thank you very much. I have several questions that are on the same topic, and I'm going to try and combine them. So if I have confused your meaning, I apologize. I have several questions here about the fact that both of you have talked about bipartisanship and working together and the need to work together, and yet there some of these comments appear to be that what we have at the moment is the exact opposite, and parties do not seem to be willing to work together. And I will start with you, Mr. Potosnak.
I think it's critical. The number one issue is creating jobs, making sure that we get folks back to work. And again, since going to Washington, my opponent has only spoken on the House floor about this, the most important issue, for 59 seconds out of the 56 million seconds that he's been there. And I think it's important to look at the balance of why that is and what's happening in Congress. When you have party line votes over and over again and party talking points that are put over the needs of our families and our businesses. And we see it. We see it over and over again in today's debate. I stand before you running for Congress to represent you, to fight for you, and to give you a voice. Because I've struggled to put myself through college, and I've struggled in my family business and the business that I began to get ahead and work hard. When I see a challenge or an obstacle, I work to overcome that. And I think America does best when it leads. What I've heard from Congressman Lance in today's debate is not leadership, is following, mentioning other members of Congress and bills that he signed on to, not issues that he's taking a lead on, speaking out in favor of the ARC tunnel, speaking out in favor of job creation. For 59 seconds, that's not enough to create jobs. We need people who are willing to stand up, to use the real life experience that they have and fight for our families, to fight for job creation, to weasel their way onto the floor and speak about what we need to get our country moving, and that is job creation. That is supporting small businesses, access to capital, being able to write off capital expenditures, investing in research development, solving our energy crisis, making sure students can afford to go to college, and the list goes on and on.
Thank you. Mr. Lance.
Thank you. I guess that was Mr. Potosnak's attempt at bipartisanship, ladies and gentlemen. It really is extraordinary to me. I have the reputation of being bipartisan, and the record to prove it. My constitutional amendment, Mr. Potosnak, my constitutional amendment prohibits further borrowing in this state without voter approval. The Lance constitutional amendment. And it took me 10 years in the state legislature to get it on the ballot. And it was only placed on the ballot, Mr. Potosnak, because the democratically controlled state Senate, under the leadership of my friend Dick Cody, placed it on our board in the state Senate. And it only got on the ballot, Mr. Potosnak, because the democratically controlled General Assembly, under the leadership of my friend Joe Roberts, placed it on the board in the General Assembly. And regarding Dick Cody, I swore him into office when he became governor in 2004, when Governor McGreevey resigned from office, certainly in the spirit of bipartisanship. If we Republicans take control of the House of Representatives in November, as is possible, then of course we Republicans will have to demonstrate that we can help govern. And we will have to help govern with the Democratic President of the United States and with those in the United States Senate, and the Democrats may continue to control the United States Senate. I believe that we will be up to the challenge and that we will govern in a bipartisan capacity. Fundamentally, however, after the election, after the dust settles, we have to make sure that we become more fiscally responsible in a bipartisan way to bring down a federal deficit of $1.3 or $1.4 trillion, and to make sure that the $13 trillion debt does not expand ever more. And I'm willing to work in a bipartisan capacity, I hope in the majority in the House of Representatives, but in any event, to move the country forward.
Thank you very much.
We have rebuttals?
After 45 seconds.
Great. You know, I think I speak for a lot of voters in the 7th District when I say that Congressman Lance, you've changed since going to Washington. You're not the congressman we expected. When health care was up for a vote, he was quoted as saying that if this bill passes, then Republicans will have the majority in the next election. If that's not partisan, I don't know what is. We need to move our country forward by investing in our future, by making sure that our country leads the global economy. And it's by working together, not dividing people. And I intend to do that in Congress. I've been very independent throughout my life. And I will work with everyone to make sure we get our economy back and our country, we get our edge back.
Thank you. Do you need 45 seconds?
I don't think so, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very sorry, your questions are really interesting, but in the interest of time, I think we have to move to our closing statement. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. There will be no opportunity for rebuttal on this one. And they have drawn their numbers for the order in which they're going to speak. And so, Mr. Lance, you get to go first.
Thank you very much, and I again want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum, and I thank all of those who are part of the audience, and I thank Mr. Potosnak for participating. The fundamental issue confronting the American nation is the state of our economy. What has occurred over the last 2 years has been very disquieting. The unemployment rate has increased from below 8% to above 10% and now stands at 9.6%. And beyond that, the fundamental issue confronting the American nation in the 21st century is fiscal responsibility. If we do not get a handle on our federal debt and annual deficits, we will lose our leadership to some other place in the world, to China, to India, or to some place I today cannot name because I do not know where it might be. I have a consistent record on these issues in Trenton and in Washington. I believe deeply that we need to get our fiscal house in order. In endorsing me last week for re-election to the Congress of the United States, the Courier-News, which is the newspaper that covers most of the congressional district, said that I am a good fit for the district and a good fit for the nation. The nation is in peril. Will our children live in a diminished America? Or will the promise of America, the promise that has always been, that each generation will do a little better than the generation before it, will that continue to occur? That is the great issue confronting us here in the United States. It is the issue on which I intend to continue to work if I'm reelected to Congress. And let me say I thank the voters and the residents of this congressional district for giving me the opportunity to serve, recognizing always, in the words of Abraham Lincoln, our greatest president, that America is still mankind's last best hope on earth. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Potosnak.
Yes, I also want to thank the League of Women Voters for having us here today. Edith, for moderating. You did a great job. And for all of you joining here in Scotch Plains, and those of you who are joining from home, Congressman Lance, for, again, finding time in your schedule to debate here on these important issues that face our nation. I'm concerned, and I think all of us share that concern, that the America that you built, that your grandparents built, is slipping away. That America, we're losing our edge. And it's because of the divisive politics that are pervasive in Washington. Career politicians like my opponent, who are more concerned with winning their next election than they are in doing the right thing for our families and our businesses, to meeting the needs of their biggest contributors, the folks that fund their campaigns, and putting their interests ahead of the needs of our families and our businesses. To get our edge back in America, we need to end tax breaks for companies that ship jobs overseas, and instead reward companies for keeping and creating jobs here. We need to help students afford to go to college, not bail out big banks with an $80 billion subsidy. We need to make sure that we invest in research and development so that we can once again lead the global economy with our entrepreneurial spirit and our inventiveness, so we can put Americans back to work in high-tech jobs for our future. America's losing its edge, and it's because of the career politicians in Washington. And you might be surprised to hear this, but Anna Little, who's running for Congress here in New Jersey, said something that I think is very fitting to this debate. And that is, in order to change Washington, you have to change the people in Washington. And my opponent is a third-generation politician who's never had a job outside of politics. His family has made politics a career. I'm a science teacher. I'm also a small business owner. I'm going to fight for your future and ensure that we get our edge back. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, you guys.
Thank you.
I want to thank both the candidates. I want to thank Marlene from the League of Women Voters of Berkeley Heights, New Providence, and Summit for doing such a wonderful job on this complicated timing, and Terry from the Somerset Hills League for helping with the questions. Reminder, Election Day is November 2nd, and for you early birds, the polls open at 6 a.m. Marlene will send out a press release as soon as we know the dates and channels that this will be broadcast. Thank you again, gentlemen. It was fun.
Can I add one plug? We have another debate scheduled this Wednesday at 8 p.m. on News Channel 12, and I hope folks can join us again for an important dialogue on the issues. Thanks again for coming.